911, what's your emergency?
No gunshot, no blood, no body was ever found. No desperate cries echoed through the night. Everything happened so quietly, it was terrifying, as if a soul had vanished in broad daylight in a small town where everyone thought they knew each other well enough. Jimmy J. Lee disappeared on a morning in July 2022 in Oxford, Mississippi, a college town that looked peaceful on the surface, where the white paint on wooden homes was always freshly brushed each summer, where lawns were trimmed with suburban precision, and where silence was mistaken for safety. But Jay's disappearance was a chilling reminder, or more precisely a haunting void, that beneath this perfectly manicured facade, darkness always lingers in places people refuse to look. Jay Lee was not someone easily forgotten. He didn't live quietly, didn't fade into the background, didn't tone it down like queer youth are often advised to do for safety. Jay lived boldly. He lived brightly. He lived unapologetically, as if his very existence was a political act. A senior majoring in social work at the University of Mississippi, Jay wasn't just another student. He was an outspoken LGBTQ+ activist, a defender of abused children, a familiar face at community advocacy events. On social media, Jay showed up in vibrant outfits, crop tops, painted nails, sometimes a wig, and always smiling. Not just a smile of joy, but a declaration: I will not apologize for who I am. But the society Jay lived in was not ready for someone like him. On the morning of July 8, 2022, surveillance footage from Lafayette Place Apartments captured Jay for the last time 6:59 a.m., walking toward an apartment, phone in hand, wearing a light-colored crop top. That was the last time anyone saw him. After that, nothing. No messages, no calls, no noise. No one saw him leave. No one called the police that day. His Honda Civic was later found at an abandoned motel, strangely parked, no blood, no signs of a struggle. His phone turned off. His beloved dog left at home, barking endlessly in hunger and confusion. Jay vanished as if he had never existed. The disappearance shocked the Oxford community, but it took days only after friends and family flooded social media for law enforcement to treat the case as serious. As the investigation widened, police discovered that Jay had been messaging with an anonymous Snapchat user named Reed and had arranged to meet them at Lafayette Place. The trail led to one named Timothy Harrington, a 22-year-old former student at the same university. White, picture perfect, longtime girlfriend. Strong academic record. A life that on the surface raised no red flags, but behind that polished image was something darker. The evidence slowly formed a shape Jay was never seen leaving the apartment. Timothy Harrington owned the unit. Less than 2 hours after Jay entered, Tim left, headed to Walmart. He bought gloves, paper towels, and cleaning supplies. Other surveillance footage showed Tim driving Jay's car across town, an act that could not be justified if Jay were still alive. Still, the case was far from simple. Tim didn't confess. No body was found. No weapon. No eyewitness. Jay's family had to rally public support, plead with journalists, and ask a terrifying question: how can someone vanish in broad daylight in a populated town, leaving behind nothing but silence? Jay's disappearance raised questions far beyond criminal guilt. It became a question of justice for queer people of color in the American South, where they are too often unseen by law enforcement, ignored by media, and forgotten by their own communities. It raised the question of what it costs to live authentically in a world where your very presence is labeled disruptive. And it asked heartbreakingly, could someone like Jay, with a heart full of kindness, a dream to become a social worker, a wish to adopt abandoned children, ever truly survive in a world still ruled by hate and fear? Oxford has not been the same since that day. Not because of a violent crime scene soaked in blood, but because of the chilling silence that followed. Because of a death no one could confirm. Because of a soul forgotten before he was ever truly seen. This is not just the story of a missing person. It's the story of what happens when a society fails to love those who are brave enough to live truthfully. And when truth becomes a threat, the liars are given the privilege of silence. Jimmy J. Lee was born to be someone who could never be ignored. He didn't need to shout to be seen. Jay's presence was a kind of energy that made people look. The son of a pastor and a tech professional, Jay grew up at the intersection of faith and creative freedom, between traditional belief and a burning desire to break boundaries. From a young age, Jay knew he was different, and he embraced it. In a Facebook post from a few years back, he wrote, "I used to think my difference was something to hide. Now I know it's what makes me strongest." At his high school in Jackson, Mississippi, Jay was an excellent student, but not the kind who faded into the background. He once challenged the principal over a rule banning feminine outfits during Spirit Week and stood up for classmates being mocked for their sexuality. Even when faced with stares, whispers, or the quiet rejection of those he once called friends, Jay kept moving one step at a time toward freedom. He didn't live just for himself. He lived for everyone who hadn't yet found the courage to step into the light. When he got to college, Jay chose social work not just out of compassion, but because he knew what it felt like to be left behind. He once said he wanted to work with homeless LGBTQ+ youth because he saw himself in them. He had been the kid who stayed silent in class when called a freak. He had been the teen who wondered if there was a place for someone like him in the world. And now Jay wanted to be the one to reach out first, to let others know they weren't alone. Friends described Jay as contagiously passionate, someone who laughed like there was no tomorrow, who dragged light into every room he entered. But no one can shine forever, especially not in a world that sees your existence as an offense. Jay was harassed online more than once. He received threats, was called every cruel name imaginable. On Twitter, he once wrote, "Living out loud is exhausting, but I'll keep doing it. Because I want to exist fully, not to be accepted, but to not be erased." In the weeks before his disappearance, Jay began to feel uneasy. Some friends said he had confided in them that he felt like someone was watching him, that something was off about the anonymous chats he'd been having through dating apps. Jay used Grindr, Tinder, Snapchat to connect, but he also knew how dangerous it could be to live openly queer in the conservative South. At one point, Jay told a close friend that he was talking to someone who seemed okay, but he wasn't sure. He says he's discreet, but very polite, not like the creepy ones. There's just something weird. That person was later identified as Timothy Harrington. Timothy was once a standout student at the University of Mississippi. White from a well-off family raised in a conservative town with a long-term girlfriend. No one thought Tim would ever be involved in a case like this. But that doesn't mean he was invisible in Jay's world. In many LGBTQ+ communities, there's a tragic but not uncommon pattern: men who live in denial of their identity, who meet in secret, hide in shame, and when confronted by their own desires, lash out at those who inadvertently reflect back a truth they cannot bear to face. Is that what happened here? Jay never spoke much about Tim. But chat logs pulled from Snapchat and other apps show they had been in contact. Jay may have thought it would be just a quick meetup, a simple conversation. He had met strangers before, but always cautiously. So what made this time different? Maybe it was because Tim looked safe. Maybe Jay had become so used to pushing past fear that he didn't realize how thin the line between courage and danger really was. Jay's friends say that in his final days, he seemed fine, still going to class, still hitting the gym, still texting jokes. But that's the most chilling thing about an approaching tragedy. There are often no signs, no goodbyes, no final instinct, just an ordinary morning and then gone forever. What makes Jay Lee's case so painful is not just the loss, but the eerie familiarity of it. How many other queer people have disappeared? How many names have been forgotten because they weren't shocking enough to make the news? How many cases were never thoroughly investigated because the victims lived on the margins, and how long until society stops asking, "What did he do wrong?" and starts asking, "How did we let this happen?" Jay wasn't an angel. He was a human being full of flaws, full of longing, full of fight. But if someone like Jay, intelligent, joyful, educated, supported, could still vanish into silence, then who among us is truly safe? The truth is no one. When someone is erased because of who they are, it's not just a personal tragedy, it's a structural failure. A wound we all helped dig through our apathy, our prejudice, our silence. Jay once said, "I don't want to be the first to do something. I just don't want to be the last." But he was the last, at least in the story of his own life. Friday, July 8th, 2022. Just another summer day in Oxford, Mississippi. The sun was soft, the weather warm enough for students in this small college town to choose walking over driving. Summers in a university town always carry a strange mood. Quiet, slow, almost lazy. Locals call it the city's pause, but for Jimmy J. Lee that day was anything but still. 8:15 a.m. surveillance cameras at the Campus Walk apartment complex where Jay lived captured him stepping out of his apartment calm, confident at ease. He wore a bright yellow women's blouse, jean shorts, white slides, and a glittering headscarf, all classic Jay, unapologetically radiant, unapologetically himself. He carried a few personal items. He was heading to visit someone he believed was safe. Someone who had talked to him long enough to make him break his usual rule, never go to a stranger's house. But Jay didn't know this would be the last time he ever walked out that familiar door, and the last time anyone would see him alive. That visit took Jay to the apartment of Timothy Harrington, a 22-year-old white man, once a standout student at the university, the son of a respected local family. No one could have guessed that two people so seemingly different would meet at the most dangerous intersection where desire, denial, and fear converge in the shadows. Around 8:30 a.m., Jay arrived at Tim's apartment. From here, everything blurs as if an invisible hand began erasing the outlines of truth. Timothy claimed Jay left after 10-15 minutes, but no camera ever showed Jay leaving the apartment. No witnesses saw him walk out. No messages were sent from Jay's phone after that time. He vanished, no explanation, no trace, as if swallowed whole by the very room that welcomed him in. But truth, as always, leaves bruises if you're willing to look closely enough. That morning, neighbors living near Tim's apartment reported hearing strange sounds around 9 a.m., a loud thud, followed by someone screaming, then silence. No one called the police, probably just someone arguing, one neighbor later said. No one thought it was the sound of someone dying. Tim's behavior grew suspicious immediately afterward. Phone data shows he searched how to get blood out of carpet later that same day. Then he went out not to call police, not to check on anyone, but to buy cleaning supplies, gloves, trash bags, bleach, cleaning cloths. Surveillance footage captured his black Honda Civic driving around town between 1 p.m. and 4 p.m., stopping at several locations. Black trash bags were loaded into the car. Tim drove to a local dumpster, then to the woods near Old Sardis Road before returning home. He appeared to be looking for a place to dispose of something or someone. That evening, when a few of Jay's friends couldn't reach him, something very unusual, they began to worry. But a few hours of silence isn't unheard of in college life, especially on a weekend. They waited, they texted, they called. They didn't know that every passing second was a step further from Jay, a step they could never retrace. The next day, Jay didn't show up to a children's charity event he had been passionately organizing. He had made detailed plans, solicited donations, called each volunteer personally. His absence was terrifyingly out of character. His family immediately reported him missing. When police got involved, they found Jay's phone offline. His laptop, wallet, and bank cards showed no activity. Jay, who updated Instagram almost daily, who still replied to messages at 2 a.m., had suddenly gone silent, as if he'd never existed. All signs pointed to one name, Timothy Harrington. Police brought Tim in for questioning. He insisted Jay left after 15 minutes and denied any involvement. But digital evidence, phone data, surveillance footage, search history began to paint a very different picture. Inside Tim's apartment, investigators found signs of a deep clean. Though the carpet had been scrubbed, UV light and biological analysis detected traces of human blood matched to Jay's DNA. A blood-stained hair strand, a wiped-down fingerprint, and most damning of all, a black trash bag in the building's dumpster containing Jay's personal belongings, gloves, bloodied fabric, a yellow cloth matching the blouse Jay wore that day. No matter how deeply buried, truth always finds a way to surface. The public erupted. Students at the University of Mississippi protested, demanding justice for Jay. His family appeared on television pleading tearfully for answers. Social media filled with the hashtag #JusticeForJaylee, a collective cry against the silence too many LGBTQ+ individuals face when they disappear from this world. And Tim, he stayed quiet, clung to his story that Jay left, and he knew nothing more. But in his eyes, investigators saw something else: fear. Not fear of being accused, but fear of what he himself had done. It's not unusual for a killer to try to hide a body. But what's unusual is the motive. A consensual visit, a death with no clear cause, a brutality too extreme for what should have been a harmless encounter. Was Jay killed simply for being himself, or did being himself strike a nerve, a fear of exposure in Timothy that he couldn't bear? That question will haunt many for a long time, because Jay's body to this day has never been found. Only the darkness knows what he endured. And only the truth, however late, can give Jay what he truly deserves: justice. When someone goes missing, the first thing police do is trace their movements. But with Jimmy J. Lee, every lead went cold just hours into that fateful morning of July 8th. No phone signal, no financial transactions, no social media updates. He vanished as if into thin air. On July 9th, police officially launched a missing persons investigation. They started with Jay's apartment, then moved through his call history, social media, traffic cameras. That's when they found his last known destination, the apartment of Timothy Harrington. Once that name entered the investigation, everything began to shift. Timothy Harrington wasn't a stranger to Jay. Message records and social media data revealed a hidden connection between the two: deleted texts, half-erased conversations, secret meetings no one else knew about. But the most striking clue came from a dating app. Jay and Tim had once chatted there using fake names and unclear profile pictures, as if one of them didn't want to be recognized. When called in for questioning, Tim appeared cooperative. He told police Jay came over for 10-15 minutes and then left. Nothing happened. In that first statement, Tim made no mention of an argument, struggle, or anything unusual. But then investigators uncovered security footage near Tim's home. A residential camera caught Tim's black Honda Civic leaving the house around noon that day. What drew attention wasn't just the car, it was the shape behind the passenger seat, a large object wrapped in black fabric resembling a body. Tim had driven to a landfill about 10 miles away. Then he headed toward a wooded area near Old Sardis Road, a secluded spot known for stashing drugs and contraband. Investigators tracked the GPS signals from Tim's phone and car to reconstruct the route, and the picture it painted was chilling. It looked like a deliberate journey to dispose of something or someone. On July 11th, armed with enough evidence, police obtained a search warrant for Tim's apartment. They walked in, and the air itself seemed to freeze. The stench of harsh cleaning chemicals filled the room. The living room rug had been removed. The floor beneath was scratched and stained. But there was no body. No visible blood. Just a space suspiciously clean for a man who lived alone. Investigators brought in forensic scanners. Results showed traces of human blood scrubbed away with industrial-strength chemicals. DNA matched Jay. In the balcony trash bin, they found Jay's personal belongings, a blood-stained piece of yellow fabric gloves, a head covering. A long, dark strand of hair lay across the rim, Jay's hair. There was no doubt anymore Jay had been there, and he hadn't walked out alive. Police confronted Tim. This time he stayed silent, no denial, no confession. Tim asked for a lawyer. On the afternoon of July 22nd, Timothy Harrington was officially arrested and charged with first-degree murder. The news set off a shockwave. Local headlines exploded. The University of Mississippi community was shaken. Many were stunned that the handsome, white church-going boy from a respected family now stood accused of murdering a black gay man. But the real grief came from the black queer community, where Jay had been a symbol of freedom and hope. Online outrage erupted. People spoke of the fear of being killed simply for existing, of how queer people of color often go missing without serious attention, of how Jay's body still hadn't been found, and how the killer showed no intent to tell the truth. In jail, Tim remained silent. Investigators continued searching the landfill, the woods nearby lakes. They used cadaver dogs and thermal drones. But Jay's body seemed to have vanished. Every scrap of fabric, every drop of blood, every footprint became a spark of hope only to be crushed. Then the investigation revealed a disturbing twist, the motive. Friends said Jay had mentioned a secret white boy he was seeing, someone terrified of being outed for dating a black gay man. According to Jay, he was loving at times, but angry and impulsive, like two different people. In one message, Jay wrote, "I think I changed him. I want to believe that." Just weeks before his death, Jay had posted a vague photo hinting at a relationship the face beside him obscured, but students on campus speculated it was Tim. And perhaps that single post had pushed Tim to the edge. A man in denial, a man unable to face the light cast on the darkness within, a fragile ego shattered by truth. Was it shame? Fear of exposure? Rage at himself, Tim won't say? And that silence kills again. This time it kills hope. With no body, prosecution faced hurdles. The defense argued, no corpse, no weapon, no confession, it's all speculation. But the prosecutor countered, we have blood, we have DNA, we have erratic behavior, we have evidence of concealment. And most of all, we have a motive rooted in someone unable to live his truth. After more than a year of investigation, authorities officially declared Jay Lee deceased. Though his remains were never recovered, the evidence was strong enough to charge Tim Harrington with first-degree murder. His court date loomed. But for Jay's family, the truth still felt incomplete. Jay's mother, Clara, said in a televised interview, "I don't need my son to be honored. I just want to bury him. I want to know if he suffered. I want to hold him one last time. But we have nothing. Just silence. Silence. And a grave with no body." Timothy Harrington stepped into the courtroom in a gray suit, his face expressionless, his deep-set eyes void of anything human. It was the first time since his arrest that he appeared in public. Cameras zoomed in on every twitch of his face. In the gallery, Jay's mother, Mrs. Clara, sat silently clutching a photo of her son. No one spoke. No one smiled. No one dared to breathe. The air felt like it was bracing for an explosion. The indictment was 23 pages long. The prosecutor read it aloud, peeling back layers of deception. They recounted the final meeting, the security footage, showing a human-shaped object in Tim's car, Jay's blood on the living room carpet, the GPS trail leading Tim to the dense woods of Old Sardis Road, the chilling route of disposal. But what haunted the room most wasn't the evidence, it was Jay's own voice. A text message recovered from his iCloud, sent just hours before Jay vanished early morning, July 8th. Jay, you said if this got out, you'd lose everything, but I never meant to hurt you. Jay, I can't live in the dark anymore. Jay, I love you, but I love myself too. 4 short messages yet. They pierced the hearts of everyone who had ever hidden their love in fear. A boy only 20 yearning to love and live authentically, and a man unable to face the light that love brought. The defense argued Tim maintains his innocence. No body, no murder weapon, no confession. They spoke of the presumption of innocence. They hinted that Jay might have run away or been harmed by someone else, but the prosecution countered with location maps, with surveillance footage, with the trembling voice of Jay's mother. "Tim, do you know how much he trusted you? He thought you were the last person who would ever hurt him, and yet." Then they called an unexpected witness, Daniel, Tim's high school best friend and former lover, who had seemingly vanished from social media for years. Under oath, Daniel described a different Timothy. Behind the friendly facade was a deeply insecure man paralyzed by the fear of being outed. Raised by a conservative patriarchal father in a strict religious home where a man had to be strong and straight. Daniel told of the time Tim sobbed after being caught looking at pictures of men online, and how later he used a knife to slice his own arm because he felt disgusted with himself. Tim once told me, Daniel said, if anyone ever tried to expose who he really was, they deserved to be punished. That sentence rang through the courtroom like a funeral bell for all those who loved someone still at war with their own reflection. In the prosecution's closing statement, the attorney said Jay Lee didn't die because he was gay. He died because he believed love could save someone who didn't want to be saved. Timothy Harrington didn't kill out of hate, he killed out of fear. Fear of the truth about himself. In that moment, Tim didn't cry. He didn't protest. He simply lowered his head and stared into nothing as if he too couldn't believe what he had done. After 3 days of deliberation, the jury returned with a verdict, guilty first-degree murder. Timothy Harrington was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The judge's gavel slammed down, echoing like the lid of a coffin with no body. Jay Lee, the young man who wore dresses to pride festivals, taught free community classes, and performed in drag shows, was now just a photo pinned to his mother's chest. The media called it a double tragedy. The victim was a black queer youth, the killer his lover, and neither was ever truly accepted by society. This wasn't just a crime, it was the cost of a world that teaches men to suppress, to deny, to perform. After the verdict, Mrs. Clara stood before the microphone. She didn't cry. She simply said Jay once wrote in his journal, "I want to live a life I don't have to apologize for." He didn't get to live that. But I hope the ones who come after him will. Months later, in a Central Park in Oxford, Mississippi, a small memorial sculpture was unveiled, a butterfly in mid-flight. At its base, the inscription read, "Jay Lee, you deserve to be here, but his body has still never been found, and somewhere deep in the forest beneath the earth or at the bottom of a lake, the truth remains unburied." Something strange happened after the verdict was announced. No one cheered. No one celebrated the idea that justice had been served. Because justice, when it arrives too late, when it can't even bring a body home for a mother to hold one last time, is no longer a victory. It's merely a delayed consolation. For months after the trial, Jay's small room in Oxford remained untouched. His mother would often sit there at dusk, playing the same playlist he used to love, from vibrant drag queen anthems to melancholic indie ballads. Each song, each photo was a whisper. "Where are you, my child?" Memorials for Jay were held across universities from Mississippi to California. Not because he was famous, but because he became a symbol for something many young people still risk their lives just to say aloud, "I am who I am, and I will not apologize for it." Jay once wrote in his journal, "I think the world needs more soft hearts, more people who know how to listen, who know how to hold someone else's pain even if they can't fully understand it." But this world, even with Pride Month rainbow flags and award-winning LGBTQ+ films, still isn't safe enough for people like Jay. Because if it were safe, Why would someone like Timothy Harrington have to live like a ghost inside his own body? If it were safe, why would parents forbid their sons from wearing dresses, scold them for playing with dolls, or demand they toughen up like real men? If it were safe. Why would someone who just wanted to love be strangled to death simply for saying, "I don't want to hide anymore"? Jay's story doesn't end with a verdict. It continues. Every time a child is kicked out for coming out. Every time a kid hears their parents say, "You're embarrassing the family." Every time a same-sex love must compromise itself in the shadows. This ending isn't meant to make you cry. It's meant to make you look at the world you're living in and ask yourself, are we killing new Jay Lees every day with our silence and our shame? There's one last detail, small, almost unnoticed. Before he disappeared, Jay posted an Instagram story. It was a photo of him standing on the dorm rooftop watching the sunset. Bare shoulders, hair tied up arms, stretched toward the sky. Behind him, the warm orange glow of a day about to fade. The caption read, "If today is my last sunset, I want it to be soft." Jay's sunset may have been stolen by someone who couldn't accept his own truth. But the light he left behind, it still radiates, it's still warm, and it still forces people to see themselves more clearly. Maybe justice can't resurrect a lost soul. But if this story makes one father hold his child and say, "I love you no matter who you are," if it helps one young person stop hating themselves for being different, if it helps a society stop using normal as a weapon to demand conformity, then maybe Jay, though denied a full life, will forever remain. In memory, in acts of kindness, in the hearts of those who ache for a stranger they never knew. And in the question we should all carry from this day forward, what will we do? Knowing that silence too can kill.